Hello, welcome to Scrap Time. My name's Christine, and in this video I am showing you the new Nuvo Chalk Mousse from Tonic Studios, as well as a couple new stencils. And I just like to say that Tonic Studios has provided me with these products to share with you today. So I'm going to be showing you 4 different ways I use the mousse, and then doing a demo on 2 different applications of the mousse in the video. So first I'll show you my samples. So this first card here, I use this stencil. It is Modern Art Deco, and I use the white Nuvo Chalk Mousse. And so just with a sponge, I put the stencil on a white, this is watercolor paper, a white card. I'm not going to demo this because whenever I do, everybody complains you can't see white on white, which is obvious. So anyway, I let it dry. It only took about 20 minutes because it's a fairly thin application, or I went back to it in about 20 minutes. It might have dried before that. And then I just sprayed it with some distress sprays. And I used squeezed lemonade, spiced marmalade, and I used picked raspberry. So I just sprayed it and then used the paper towel, and you can see the bit of the resist of the mousse once it's dry with water-based products. And then to get that darkness, I just used the Distress Crayon in Walnut Stain. It's here. Distress Crayon in Walnut Stain. And then I used the applicator, and just with a bit of water, I just brushed it on over top just to give it a bit of darkness. So it's basically using it as a resist. This next card here, I did it offset, and this is the card I'm going to demo. I used the new Simple Heart stencil here. I put white down first, and I did it with a sponge application, and then the pink was done with a palette knife. So as I said, I'll be demoing that momentarily. Then I want to use the paste almost like a paint. So with my palette knife, I just put on some of the pink, put on some of the blue-green, and then once it dried, I put the white through. And I'm doing these on black paper just because whenever there's a chalk product, a lot of times it's to let you know that you can use it on black paper. Of course, it would work on white paper as well, but just to show you how it shows up on black paper. Now, I just want to say, though, if you're to use a sponge application, it's very faint, which you'll see in the demo. And so for this, I'm using my palette knife and sort of just putting it onto the card. And then with this last one, I did a couple things. It was similar to the previous one, but this time I was overlapping, and I put on all the colors while they were wet. And so they were sort of blending into one another. And then with the white standing like sort of popping up off it. And then I just took a stamp I had. This is just an older stamp I had. And while it's wet, you can stamp in it and it will hold the texture. Should be able to see the texture there. So you can layer it on and use any stamp you have and just add texture to your background and then let it dry. And then from here, I would do something on top of it, but I want to show you the full background. So that's a few different ways and applications you can use this mousse. But as I said, I'm going to show you the offset hearts. So first I'm going to be using the white, which is Coconut Sorbet chalk mousse, and I'll open it up so you can see what it is. If you've used any of their other embellishment paste, it's basically the same thing, but it's probably a little different. They're more pastel-y and chalky. And I'm using the Simple Heart stencil. I'm going to use it upside down because it's basically the same pattern either way. And I'm going to sort of line it up. I can see the black card through the stencil. And I'm not taping my card down, but I'm going to tape my stencil down. Just using a little piece of washi tape. I'm just taping it there to hold it. So for the first layer, I'm going to use a little makeup sponge, and I just get it on and then start putting it in my stencil. And you'll see that when you use a sponge, you're going to get just, it's going to be very soft and subtle. And that's why with some of the other techniques, it was too soft, and I used the palette knife, which we will do for step 2 of this so you can see the difference. So I'm just going to put it all over. And then later to clean the stencil, I just use some water, and I have a little scrubby brush that I use just to make sure it comes off. So I'm just going over and making sure. Because a lot of these hearts will be covered again, you don't fully have to worry about it. Now, the reason I like to do this is it allows you to lift it up and you can sort of see it. And I'm happy with that layer. Now, because it's so thin, I'm not too concerned about it drying for the next layer. And I'm also not going to clean my stencil. So next I'm going to use, it's called Strawberry Frappe. And you can see what a pretty pink it is. So this time I'm going to just shift my stencil slightly. I think like that is pretty good. So I'm offsetting the stencil so you can see the difference, the black is popping through. This time I'm going to use a palette knife. So you can see when I used the sponge that some of that black is still popping through. So it's fine for some techniques, but because now I want that pink to be nice and solid, I'm going to use the palette knife. And when you use a palette knife, you just think of it as like icing a cake. I'm filling in all those hearts. A bit of the white is coming through, but I am not too concerned. If there's a little bit of white in my hearts, that's fine. Now I find this particular palette knife to be a little large for the project, but it is what I currently had, so I just went with it. And you want to take your time because you don't really want it to go underneath, but the paste is nice and thick that it doesn't really seep. And when I'm doing it too, I'm pulling off some of that excess paste and using it if you have a lot of excess. And I'm only taking a little bit at a time. It just gives you more control over what you're doing. And sometimes you might find if you scrape off some paste when you go over, you can just go back over it with a bit more paste and it'll be fine. You can fix that up. We're almost there. Just going to take off some of the excess pastes. Okay, and then I just take a paper towel and wipe off the excess off my palette knife. So now it's time for the big reveal. Ta-da! And so that extra little bit of white popping through just gives it that extra dimension, which I think is really cute. So that's the difference between using a sponge and a palette knife. You can see how solid this pink is, and it also gives some texture. You'll just want to let it sit a bit to dry, whereas when you use the sponge, it has that very thin, and you can see through it, whereas when you use it with the palette knife, it's opaque. So hopefully that gives you some ideas and inspiration to use some of the new Nuvo Chalk Mousses, and you can check them out at Tonic Studios. Thanks for watching. Be sure to give our video a thumbs up and subscribe to Scrap Time videos on YouTube. In the meantime, here are a couple of the videos you might be interested in watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.